Volvo goes all electric. Apple leases a small fleet of cars for self-driving technology. And electric car charging while driving. Today is July 5th and you're watching the Innovation Report Car Edition. Since we're in July already, you have a big decision to make. Whether you're going with glasses like these or sunglasses like this. Well, because we're in the summer, so that means you're going on more road trips. So for this Innovation Report, we're changing things up to make it a bit different and focus on one specific thing at a time, which is cars, or in the broad spectrum, is transportation. Now, when we're talking about cars, the one thing to keep in mind is, of course, the trend towards electric. So the first thing that's happening is Volvo just released an announcement, which is they're trying to make all their cars and vehicles and lines to go all electric by 2019. So what Volvo is trying to do is they have three phases, or rather three lineup and categories of electric vehicles.
Volvo's drivetrain program will be based on a mix of mild hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and pure electric drivetrains. The mild hybrid is a 48-volt system, using a combination of a battery that stores energy and a solution that acts as both a starter, generator, and electric motor.
Now, with Volvo being one of the first major premier automaker to actually transition from the internal combustion engine into electric, it signals a radical change. Of course, we have cars and car companies like Tesla making electric cars more mainstream and having the cool factor. However, now we're starting to see more and more widespread adoption of electric vehicles for the consumer market. Next, let's talk about cars, or rather charging or refueling cars. Now, if you have a normal internal combustion engine, what ends up happening is you have to put gas or diesel depending on what kind of car you have. But when you're looking at electric cars, you have to think about how can you recharge it. Now, just like any battery, whether it's an iPhone or a smartphone or another device, you have to think about charging it and you just plug it in. Now with electric cars, it's a similar way where you plug it in, whether it's your home or a charging station. However, a company like Qualcomm Technologies, what they're trying to do is look at how can you make it wireless charging. So with wireless charging, basically you have the phone or your car in this case near in the proximity area and it charges. Now they're taking it one step further, which is how can you charge cars when it's driving? Now it's called DEVC, which is Dynamic Electric Vehicle Charging. And what they're trying to do is they're running a pilot project which is costing roughly around 9 million euros to test it out if this works. And if this feasibility study works, then it's going to be effective to help reduce wait times when you're traveling long distance. So you can not only drive but also charge at the same time, and this will present some interesting dynamic for gas stations in the future. Because if you think about it, one of their main revenue sources is through selling of food, condiments, etc. And what ends up happening is if you don't need to necessarily stop over for charging, and if you're driving, how is that going to impact gas stations and stations around the world? That's going to be an interesting dilemma. As we're talking about electric cars, let's talk next, which is about autonomous vehicles. So obviously we have cars such as Tesla, which is almost trying to be autonomous, or they have the built-in capabilities, but they're waiting on legislations. Then we have companies like Uber that's already starting to use autonomous vehicles for their ride-sharing services. But now we take a look at the other set of companies that are not necessarily in the market but venturing in, and one case or one company in particular is Apple. So documents by the DMV is actually showing Apple is leasing cars from Hertz and their Dublin leasing entity to rent out a fleet of cars to test out autonomous driving technology for their new venture. So Apple obviously has been testing this out for a couple months now, and this presents a new frontier of leasing out more cars to test it out with more vehicles. Because of this, Hertz share prices have increased, considering they were in a very much of a decline since last year to date. At the same time, since Alphabet's Waymo has partnered with Avis, we're starting to see more deals and partnerships like this with rental companies. Now, it presents an interesting challenge when you're thinking about, well, what's the future of rental companies as well as companies that are venturing into the space. Now, obviously, Uber has been in some heat lately, but with their push with autonomous vehicles and self-driving technologies, just like partnering or competing against Apple as well as Google's, or pardon me, Alphabet's Waymo, what ends up happening is it's going to push the companies to get to market much quicker, which means it'll be much better for all of us, as it's shown that self-driving cars is actually tending to reduce driver and traffic incidents. So I, for one, am excited for this. So what do you think? Would you want to just rely on having a company like Uber and getting cars, self-driving cars from them? Or would you actually want to own a self-driving car? If you're downtown or in metropolitan cities, what ends up happening is if you're leasing or renting cars, because parking space is so high, that may make sense. Whereas if you're in the suburbs or outside in rural areas, having a autonomous vehicle might make a bit more sense. So let me know, what do you think? Would you prefer to rent or buy autonomous vehicles, or you don't want to do autonomous vehicles as of yet? Let me know in the comments below. Well, that's it for this week's Innovation Report highlights. If you want the full Innovation Report, that's not only talking about transportation, but also other areas such as robotics, artificial intelligence, and energy, head on over to the link below, or you can watch previous Innovation Reports right there. Thanks for watching. I'm Najeeb Khan, and I'll see you next week.